Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Giant footprints. There are countless legends around the world of giants. These behemoths can be found in the mythologies of Greece, Scandinavia, Germany, India, Mexico, Peru, so pretty much everywhere there are stories about giants. The Maya told tales of giant humans, and giants are even mentioned in the Bible. The Vikings also believed in the existence of titanic men and women. But how much proof do we have that giants walked among us? The truth is, there isn't much. We have myths and legends, but real physical evidence is scarce. And that brings us to the giant footprints that have been found across the globe. There's allegedly a giant footprint like the fossil of some prehistoric animal embedded in a rock in Russia. And there's another one in South Africa near the border of Swaziland. A third can be found near Bangalore, sideways in a rock, as if a huge giant ninja kicked his massive footprint into the stone. The biggest issue with all these random footprints that were supposedly left behind by giants is that nobody has ever verified them as real. The footprints haven't been cataloged by accredited scientific journals, and archaeologists don't talk about them. And even most mainstream scientists believe they are a hoax. One of the most recent stories comes to us from a Chinese village. Photographers exploring a remote area supposedly came across a footprint that was left behind by a giant. They took pictures of their own feet in the footprint, and theirs hardly filled a third of the space. It's clearly a footprint in the rock, but there is only one, not two like you'd expect to find. There isn't a trail leading to or away from the print, and nobody knows how old it is. A similar footprint was found in South Africa, in the Mpumalanga province. It was measured at nearly 4 feet long and is perfectly preserved in a chunk of granite. Locals call it the footprint of God and treat it as a holy place. African shamans say the footprint was left behind by a giant fleeing across a layer of warm lava after a volcanic eruption. These footprints do seem to exist all over the globe, but other than the local legends attached to them, nobody seems to have an answer for how they got there. And now for number 9. But first, it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to Chadro Doni and Raul Stevens for supporting this channel. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. We'd love to have you, and we have lots more videos coming up. Number 9. The Temples of the Sun God. A short 20-minute drive from the Great Pyramid of Giza will take you to the remains of another Egyptian monument, one that you won't find swarmed by eager tourists. It's the ruins of Abu Ghorab, an ancient complex of sun temples where devotees of the god Ra once gathered to give praise to their sun deity. It's part of the later complex of Abu Sir, constructed in the 5th dynasty of the Old Kingdom, around 2400 BC. According to legend, Abu Ghorab was once home to 6 solar temples. These were great and majestic temples used for a variety of purposes. Some historians think the solar temples were occupied by astronomers carrying out meticulous observations of the cosmos. This train of thought turns the solar temples into a kind of weather station, where astronomers kept track of the hours, days, and important celestial events. Others believe the solar temples were part of a singular cultic site, a place that saw rituals and ceremonies unfold, but nobody knows the exact truth. And to this day, only 2 out of the 6 temples have been found, Usarkaf and Nayusera. Abu Ghorab was also home to a massive obelisk. Excavations in the courtyard revealed the ruined foundations of a monumental stone tower with 4 sloping sides. It was about 60 feet high and was crafted from red granite and limestone. Some experts have theorized the obelisk was meant to be a monument to Ra's resting place, kind of like his gravestone. That would explain why there were so many temples in his honor at this mysterious place. Everything about Abu Ghorab is strange and mysterious. There is a giant stone pedestal that some have called a stargate, although there's little proof of that. There are also giant alabaster dishes scattered throughout the site that contain bizarre designs on their surface. Some experts have suggested these were ritual bowls filled with animal blood, but again, it's never been confirmed. Many of these structures at Abu Ghorab are even complete with drill holes, perfectly smooth boreholes and hard granite that look as though they were created by machines. This was clearly a place of great importance, but all we see today are endless riddles. Number 8. Buried secrets. Archaeologists recently discovered a sunken Roman room at the Leicester Cathedral in the UK. The chamber, sunk beneath the ground, dates back to 200 AD. It's been a wildly exciting discovery because it seems to confirm an old folktale. Long before the cathedral was created, locals told tales of how the grounds were used in dark rituals, such as blood sacrifice and demon worship. The rumors were always dismissed as ancient nonsense. But with the discovery of the sunken chamber beneath the church, scientists are starting to wonder if there really was evil cult activity here 1,800 years ago. The chamber isn't particularly large. It's only about 13 feet by 13 feet, hidden about 10 feet beneath the surface. Archaeologists say it was an expertly crafted subterranean structure with a hard concrete floor and painted walls. And here's where things get exceptionally creepy. Inside the room was nothing except the base of a sandstone altar lying in a pile of rubble. This was an altar like you'd expect to find in some dark underground dungeon, where cultists were worshipping Cthulhu or some other malicious entity. In a press release, Matthew Morris, who led the excavation, said the room could be linked to the worship of one or more gods. But the whole thing is still a major mystery. Matthew went on to say that the subterranean room was likely a private place of worship. This means it could have been a family shrine or a cult room for a small group worshipping the same dark deity. Then again, the deity might not have been wicked. Plenty of underground chambers like this were used by followers of fertility cults and mystery cults. Those who worshipped Dionysus, Cybele, or Mithras all used similar underground chambers. And since there is no inscription on the altar, it's impossible to tell who the primary god was. Number 7. The Runamo Runes. Every now and then, an archaeologist will get a little too wrapped up in their work and make a mistake. It happens, which isn't surprising given that archaeologists are people too. The case of the Runamo runes is an excellent example of when an expert gets swept up in their own fantasy. The story of the Runamo runes takes us to a cliff face in Blekinge, which is located in southern Sweden. It was here where scholar Saxo Grammaticus first noted an unusual runic inscription in the 12th century AD, which he wrote about in his book, the Gesta Danorum. He thought the runes were illegible and that nobody was able to make out any of the words. Still, he attributed the runes to King Harald Wartooth of Denmark. King Harald's father had waged war to unite the forces of Sweden and Denmark in the 7th century AD, and Grammaticus believed the inscription was a memorial to that event. The issue was that the scholar couldn't read the runes and had no real evidence to back up his claim. In the 17th century AD, the rock was inspected again by a Danish antiquarian named Ole Worm. He too thought the runes were illegible, and other expeditions in the 18th century came to the exact same conclusion. The markings on the cliff face did look like runes, but none of the professionals could make sense of what was written. And now we arrive in modern times. The Danish Academy of Sciences sent a commission to figure out what was going on in 1833. The runes were then transferred to copper plates and given to Icelandic archaeologist Finn Magnusson to investigate. After a lot of analysis, Magnusson published his own translation of the runes. He believed they spelled out an ode to King Hildetand and the Battle of Bravalla, which is said to have taken place in 770 AD. But since then, this theory has been proven to be wrong. Magnusson was a respected academic who was brutally shamed when scientists finally concluded the runes were nothing but cracks in the rock. It was totally natural, just a bunch of splits in the stone that looked like runic symbols. Scientists couldn't solve the mystery because there was no mystery at all. Magnusson simply made up his translation, and it had no basis in reality. They weren't letters, they were cracks. Number 6. The Ancient Atomic Bomb. The Mahabharata is one of the most important ancient texts in all of India. It's a huge book filled with 100,000 verses that are divided into 18 parts, each one big enough to be its own individual book. It's about 10 times larger than Homer's Odyssey and the Iliad combined. The Mahabharata is so big and complicated, scholars have been trying to understand it for over 2,000 years. It's believed most of the book was written in the 3rd century BC, with the most recent parts likely added somewhere around the 4th century AD. The stories in the Mahabharata are philosophical, religious, and downright fanciful. It's been called the longest epic poem ever written. Some might even think of it as the Hindu version of the Bible or the Quran. Historian Kesari Mohan Ganguly believes the Mahabharata contains descriptions of nuclear holocausts that happened thousands of years ago. To understand, we have to look at one particular block of text. The text describes a flying Vimana hurling a projectile charged with the power of the universe. A Vimana was an ancient flying machine described in various Hindu texts, which obviously includes the Mahabharata. It was supposedly a floating city or palace, an ancient vehicle-like device used by the gods to travel from place to place. In this block of text, the Vimana launches a projectile with the power of the universe. What follows is a radiant column of smoke and fire, a flame brighter than 10,000 suns, that reduced entire races to ash. And if you really think about it, this description sounds an awful lot like a nuclear blast. The idea here is that the Mahabharata is telling a story about someone launching a nuclear missile from an aircraft. The thing nobody can explain is how the author of the book had any inkling as to what a nuclear weapon was 2,400 years ago. What do you think? Was it a nuclear war that occurred sometime in the ancient past? Or what other explanation could there be? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Number 5. The Astronaut of Casar. There is an artifact on display at the Cáceres Museum in Spain that scientists can't seem to get a grip on. The artifact in question is an upright slab of stone called a stele. It was discovered at the edge of a cemetery in the Spanish village of Casar. The stele is complete with a carving of what looks to be a human figure. The issue is that the figure doesn't appear to be completely human and looks like either an alien or a monster. It has a fishbowl-shaped head, big shoulders, and at the right angle, looks like it's wearing a spacesuit. Some say the stele offers proof of an ancient astronaut who visited Spain. Others say it's just a human figure who's been eroded by time and harsh weather. The figure is called the Astronaut of Casar. Along with the mysterious figure is an inscription written in Latin that's never been deciphered. The stele is so badly weathered that not even the best linguistic experts have been able to make sense of the letters. Because of the ambiguity surrounding the inscription, conspiracy theorists have been able to come up with their own explanations. It's technically impossible to say the figure isn't an alien, which means it's doubly impossible to say the inscription wasn't written in alien code. But what do we know for sure about the stele? For starters, it was likely made around the 1st century BC, and it remained at the edge of this cemetery for centuries. Before it was placed in the museum, local kids used to throw rocks at it. Villagers would also make the sign of the cross on their chest, and then whisper a small prayer every time they walked by the stele because they thought it was evil. The best guess archaeologists have, outside of the figure being an alien, is that it represents a Celtiberian warrior. There are also those who say the inscription might be written in the ancient Basque language of the Iberian Peninsula. But to date, the stele has never been translated, so who's to say what's really written on the ancient slab of stone? Number 4. Falcon Shrine. A group of archaeologists investigating the ancient Egyptian port city of Berenice found an unexplainable shrine. They discovered proof of previously unknown ancient rituals that would give even the most strong-minded individuals the creeps. It all has to do with a bunch of headless falcons in the eastern Egyptian desert. According to the study, which was recently published in the American Journal of Archaeology, excavators were digging through a religious complex from the late Roman period. This was after the death of Cleopatra, in the early centuries AD when Rome ruled Egypt. Scientists from the Polish Center of Mediterranean Archaeology have since named the complex the Falcon Shrine. It was built as a traditional Egyptian temple, but after the 4th century AD, it was adapted to the belief system of the Blemmyes. The Blemmyes were a little-known people who appeared in the Eastern Desert in the 7th century BC. Nobody knows much about their history or where they came from, but by the 4th century AD, they had migrated into Lower Nubia and established their own obscure kingdom. And although their small kingdom may not have played a huge role in their history, their people never faded out of existence. The modern Beha people of eastern Sudan and northwestern Eritrea are the direct descendants of the Blemmyes. Inside the Falcon Shrine, archaeologists found the remains of 15 falcons. Most of the falcons had been beheaded, and many of them were buried with eggs. They were mummified too, suggesting they had been placed in the temple as religious offerings. The Blemmyes appear to have established a falcon cult in Berenike, but what exactly the cult did is anyone's guess. The shrine did contain one rather strange inscription that reads, "It is improper to boil a head in here." Researchers think that for such a sign to exist, there must have been a lot of head boiling going on. Number 3. England's Chalk Horse. Near the village of Uffington in Oxfordshire, hidden in the English countryside, is a giant chalk horse that's etched into the grassland. It's located at the top of a grassy mound, and the horse dominates the flank of the hill. You can see it perfectly if you stand in the valley near the village and look up at the sprawling grassland. It's a humongous white horse that almost looks like the stick figure version of the animal. It's thin, simple, and has an unusually long tail, but nobody knows what it's doing there. Locals call it the Uffington White Horse, and as far as we know, it's the oldest figure that can be found among the English hills. The pictogram is the size of a football field, about 360 feet long, and can be seen from up to 20 miles away. It would have vanished by now if not for the annual tradition of Chalking Day. For 3,000 years, locals have continued the tradition of cleaning the horse and maintaining its perfectly white appearance. They use hammers, buckets of chalk, and everyone hobbles around on their hands and knees, whitening the horse. Antiquarian Francis Wise wrote about the tradition in 1736. He said the ceremony of scouring the horse came from time immemorial, originating sometime in the distant past. Modern historians think it's been going on ever since the horse was created, although nobody can pinpoint a date for that. Families come with knee pads, and parents chalk the horse with their kids just like their parents did with them when they were young. National Trust Ranger Andy Foley said that if people didn't look after the horse, it would have been overgrown within 20 years. It's truly amazing to think the horse has been cared for by so many people for so many years. And yet still, nothing is known about its origins. Archaeologist David Miles excavated the horse in the 1990s to establish more information about it. He and his team learned that it was cut into the hill up to 3 feet deep. Somebody cut the horse's shape from the hillside, then filled it with chalk. And every year, the horse is whitened to make it look brand new. But to this day, we have no idea why the horse was made and by who. So unfortunately, the mystery remains. Number 2. The Piltdown Man. The Piltdown Man came into existence in February 1912. Hunting enthusiast and lawyer Charles Dawson reported the discovery of a fossilized human skull near Piltdown in Sussex, which is located in the United Kingdom. The first fragment of the skull was found a few years earlier by someone working in a gravel pit. But the discovery was solidified when Dawson found more pieces of the puzzle. Dawson and his colleagues excavated the gravel pit for months after, joined by the occasional foreign archaeologist interested in the discovery. They recovered a partial jaw, teeth, animal fossils, and primitive tools. In December 1912, Dawson presented his findings to the Geological Society. Using the fossilized pieces he uncovered, he and his team had reconstructed the skull of what he called the missing link. Dawson claimed he'd found the legendary missing animal between apes and humans, which he said lived 500,000 years ago. The creature became known as the Piltdown Man, but it was known scientifically as Eoanthropus dawsoni. The discovery was hot on the trail of another that had taken the anthropological community by storm. German scientist Otto Schoetensack had just discovered the Heidelberg Man in 1907. At the time, it was the oldest human fossil in the world, estimated to be between 400,000 and 600,000 years old. But then Dawson came around with his new discovery of the Piltdown Man in 1912. But Dawson's missing link turned out to be a fraud. However, he still enjoyed scientific prestige until November 21, 1953. That was when modern science finally proved the Piltdown Man was a carefully constructed fake. Dawson had orchestrated the whole thing just to make himself look good. And it worked because he died in 1916, never having to answer for his lies. To this day, scientists still haven't found the true missing link between primitive humans and apes, which begs the question, was there really a missing link to begin with? Number 1. Pochalaga. In Canada, one of the most widespread and successful First Nations groups prior to the arrival of the Europeans was the Iroquois, and one of their most important villages was Pochalaga, which is recognized by the Canadian government as a National Historic Site. But in reality, the village doesn't currently exist. It has no physical remains, and it's unclear if it ever existed at all. It's believed the village is somewhere beneath the concrete of Montreal, specifically underneath the landmark known as Mount Royal. But nobody's ever found it, and archaeologists aren't about to dig up the whole city. Most of what we know comes from legend and from the stories passed down for the past few centuries. The village was supposedly a successful trading post inhabited by a powerful Iroquois federation. They were farmers and traders who ruled an area around the St. Lawrence River between 1200 AD and 1600 AD. The name of the village, Pochalaga, likely comes from the Iroquois word beaver path. And although there is no physical evidence that the village existed, we know there was a settlement on the island of Montreal when Europeans arrived in 1535. The first explorer to reach the village was Jacques Cartier from France. His first visit to the village was what drew other French explorers and settlers to the area in the following decades. Pochalaga is believed to be responsible for the city of Montreal, built from the village's Iroquois foundations. And here's a little-known fact for those who are interested. Canada is the Iroquois word for settlement. People still remember the history of Pochalaga these days. It's just that nobody knows what happened to it, or if it really is buried under Montreal. There was a plaque placed in a suburb in 1920 to honor Pochalaga, and a municipal park was named after the village as well. But not a single artifact from it has ever been recovered. Thanks for watching! What are your thoughts on these mysterious ancient enigmas? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up for more. See you next time. Bye!